Hello, welcome to another session on Applaud training. In this particular session we are going to be looking at a very specific type of configuration, that around configuring special information types and extra information types. This learning is going to extend the learning we've had on the first two sessions. We're going to be covering personalization via fast formula. We're going to be looking at security again, and a couple of more new topics on data security. And to finish off this session, we're also going to be looking at an interesting topic about how you can configure your own read-only views, that you can display any information from any Oracle table. If you can write a SQL view or a SQL table, you can display that information in our mobile application and our desktop application through configuration, and we use data security again for that. So that will round off the topic for this third suite of training. Let's go over the training goals. First of all, prerequisite is that you've completed the training for personalization and you've completed the training for RBAC security, or if you haven't done that training, then you've had experience and understand how those concepts take place within Applaud. We will be using concepts taken from all of those sessions when we're configuring EITs and SITs. So at the end of this set of training, you'll be able to do the following. You'll be able to set up a new page to bring back a particular EIT or SIT, format it as a display. We'll talk a little bit more about whether you allow the users to add new rows, update rows, delete rows, or a combination of those. And again, whether that's the employee or the manager, got good control over that particular ability to add, update, or delete. And then actually the additional configuration to display a read-only view of another piece of information from a custom table or custom view or another Oracle view it's quite similar in the task that you go through to do that. So we'll cover that in one final session at the end, custom views. So creating EITs and SITs, it can be a very common task. Lots and lots of self-service customers use EITs and SITs for a variety of processes. We find particularly in clients in the Middle East, some menus have many SITs or EITs on them. Our record that we've seen is 50. So if you've got a customer that's got more than that, well done. You might hold the record, let me know. But if you do come to a client that has that many EITs, SITs, it's important to know how to set those up. Now it's broken out into a separate session because EITs and SITs are of course based on flex fields, and therefore when we ship our solution out of the box, we can't ship an EIT or SIT screen without knowing the details of the particular flex field setup that the customer has. The field could have 1 segment, 2 segments, 5 segments, 30 segments. It could have different validation, different prompts or whatever. So we do in Applaud try to default as much as possible, but there will always be some setup that you as a consultant have to do for every single EIT or SIT that you want to configure. Now the steps on screen cover the 7 steps that you have to go through to do an EIT and SIT, and I'll run through those now. Step 1, you define your layout menu and view functions. We covered that in the first session. So remember that registered views menu, and we created a new layout and view functions as well. So that we'll go through and we'll recap that particular setup. New for this session is we define a data source. Where is the data coming from that is going to be shown on screen? That's a new topic. So before, we haven't really covered this. We've glossed over that topic a little bit in previous sessions, but today we are going to go through how you configure a source of information to be shown in a screen. Third, another very small new piece is how you control whether you give the ability to add a new row or create permission, give a create permission, is what we class it as the topic here. So not all users will be able to add new rows, for example. Sometimes You want employees only to read EITs or maybe change them. Sometimes you don't want managers to be able to create new rows. Sometimes the manager will create one and an employee can update one. So there's all sorts of requirements. You have control on whether you allow a user to be able to create or add a new row. That's step 3. Step 4 or 5 goes back to session 1, where we revisit creating the view fast formula and creating the edit fast formula. So the view fast formula configures how the data is displayed on screen for existing rows. The edit fast formula controls how the user keys in the data into the screen. And then we get into security to finish off. Step 6 is you give access to the layout to the employee or manager role or any other roles that you have. So this is RBAC security. We did this in the second session. You have to give access so that menu option appears on the person's menu. And then final session, step 7, this is giving access to the data source. It's tied in to step 2 actually. We define a data source, and then with roles-based access control we have to give access to read that data source, and that's the final new piece for today. So step 2, 3 and 7 are the new topics that we cover for EITs and SITs, and those are also going to be topics that will be used when we talk about custom views. So because this is quite a common task and there's just lots of steps to run through, we actually have created what we call a quick setup guide for SITs and EITs. It's on our support portal. I'd recommend you download that and use it if you can. That document will take you through the steps that you need to do, but what it will not do is kind of give you the background on why you're doing it. So it's a good reference guide for a consultant just to kind of go through a checklist of tasks, but really the aim of this particular topic and training is for you to understand the concepts and why you're doing these steps. Okay, so we are going to work off our training environment, and we are going to work through an exercise using this particular information type called company property. So company property is based on a special information type, SIT. It looks like this on screen. It's defined as a list, so in other words you can have multiple records. As I go through this training, EITs are set up in an almost identical way to SITs. There are a few differences, not many. I'll highlight the differences when we get to that point, but generally the exact concepts are the same for doing SITs versus EITs. So this is a list display. So this is used for when you have an SIT or EIT that can have multiple rows for the person. You know that some EITs can be set, or SITs can be set up so you only have a single row. But you've got multiple rows you want to list. This is an example of another information type where it's only single row. So here we've got an example called passports. In this particular scenario, the employee only ever has one passport, and therefore it's a single row information type. This passport details one is the one that we will look at when you do the training exercises. So you get a chance to look at a different information type that we have set up. This one here is an example. Academic rank is based on EIT, and it's based on the list layout. So this is again an example when you're showing multiple rows of information. Now I mention this at this point because these are available in our training environments and our demo environments. So if you're a consultant just starting out with Applaud and you want to set up EITs and SITs, these are good samples for you to come and look at how they're set up. If you want to look at SITs, then look at this one here, company property. If you want to look at EITs, then look at this one, academic rank. The setup is very similar, but these are good examples on our own instance for you to review and copy if you need to. So let's go through doing this. Let's see. So step 1, first of all, create a layout menu. So first of all, you need to decide how many SITs or EITs you want on a page. In the company property example here, we've just got one panel. On this one, we've got 2. So first of all, you decide how many you want to see on the screen. You can have up to 4. I wouldn't recommend going past 2 really. The performance can slow down if you've got too many objects on the screen at once, but it's up to you. You can technically have up to 4. This particular example, we've got 1. So you put in that function there, it shows you've got 1 region. And then you need your view function in there. So obviously you do the view function first. In this case, we've got a view function with that name, that code. The object name is Applaud HR assignment. Remember, that's for the data security we talked about on the session 2. Icon, of course. In this case, we've got phone. So I'll just go back to the company property screen. It's got a little icon there that's got the phone at the top left here. That's coming from the icon on the view function. Okay. So the module is always going to be flexible, and the layout is list. So you choose list or form. List if you've got multiple rows to show, or form if you've only ever got 1. Now then we've got this data function. We talked about that a little bit on day 1, session 1, where we talked about the data function specifying the approval rules, if you remember that. The data function becomes important here too, because this is the function that also defines where the data is coming from for display in screen. So we'll come on to that later on in this session. And then we've got the view formulas and the edit formulas. These are the formula that allow you to personalize the display and control the behavior in the edit. So this is really your first step, is to define a view function. You notice at this point we're not talking about the name of the EIT or SIT at all, just setting up a regular function this way, and then we add it to a layout menu, and this would effectively be the page that you will see the EIT or SIT on. Okay, so that's step 1, easy enough. Right, let's talk about data objects again. So do you remember from the RBAC session we talked about data objects? We focused in that session on the HR assignment data object, which was used to control the security on the display of the layout. Okay, well in this one we're going to look at another 2 objects that we ship, one for SIT and one for EIT. Now both of these data objects are based on database views that we ship. Okay, so we've got 2 objects here. There's the code. This is the main bit of information, the database object here and here. Okay, so these views are developed by us, Applaud, and they actually combine information. They combine information from the base table, from per extra info, for example, along with all the transaction data, which is all the EITs or SIT rows that are pending approval. So it's a combination of committed rows and pending approval rows that are coming back in this view. Alright, so just bear this in mind. When you see Applaud HR person EIT and Applaud HR person SIT, what that means is we're reading from our own database view, which is effectively the Oracle table plus rows pending approval. Okay, so do you remember when I just said this, when I defined the view function, we talk about having a data function. You can see on this example the data function xxas underscore data underscore co underscore prop. Okay, xxas data co prop. Okay, so the data function looks something like this. We have seen this before on session 1, but we're going to go into a little bit more detail now. First of all, we've got this thing called the implementation package. Should never change that. That points at the PL SQL that we use to call the relevant APIs. Okay, and for SITs, it's got XXA's person SIT package. You'll never change that. Okay, you'll always keep that the same. Now we've got this pflex structure code. So this is for SITs, this particular one. So for SITs, there is a parameter called pflex structure code, and you must set that to the structure code of your SIT. Very important you change that. If you forget to change this, your SIT won't work. won't save. Okay, so this is step one to remember. Often, if you're doing lots of SITs and EITs, what you'll find is you'll copy other functions that have been set up, like a template. But the thing you always have to do is change this structure code for SITs. So that matches the flex field structure code. I should make that clear. The flex field structure code. Then you have this view XML. This basically defines the behavior in the edit window and which fields are available by default. Again, you don't change that, but just notice it says person sit.xml there. Never change that, just keep that the same. And then this p called from is the function that sits on your employee self-service menu, and what we do is we take the workflow that it sits against that particular function, and that is the workflow we call. And often your workflow will define your AME rules as well. So another thing to check on screen, this is called in the default Oracle workflow, but often you'll have your own workflow that, your own SIT or EIT function that you'll have developed for your employee self-service menu. You usually have to change that as well. So the 2 points you normally have to change on this data function are these two things: the structure code and the p called from. You can also put a p order by parameter on here, and that gives you the ability to order the list as it's displayed on screen. As another challenge with SITs and EITs, of course, if I want to order this particular list, how do I order it? Which segment do I order it in? By default, I think it orders on the date the row was created by, but that's sometimes not the way you want to order it. In this case, we might want to order this based on the issued on value, which could be, I don't know, segment 2, could be segment 6, we don't know. So if you want to specify ordering this list on a particular segment, then you use that p order by parameter. I think there's some examples hanging around that you can see. Let's just get back to our other slides. Now, final thing, the data object here. Notice it doesn't say Applaud HR assignment, it says Applaud HR person SIT. Very, very important. This object here on this function specifies the database table or view that provides the data to the screen. Okay, so if you remember back, I'll go back a couple of slides. Oops, too many. Sorry, here we go. Remember, data objects, Applaud HR person EIT, SIT, links off to a database object on the database, in this case views. And then when we're in the data function here, what that is saying is we have this object is the source for the data to be displayed on the screen. I'm going to draw this up on one of my lovely whiteboards in a minute, so we'll demonstrate this visually in a second. Just quickly onto EITs, you have to do pretty much the same for EITs. You have to define a data function, but there are a few differences. First of all, the object name is EIT rather than SIT. Implementation is EIT here, and the XML is EIT here, so a very small change here and here. And then the main change is this parameter is not P structure code, it's P information type. P information type. So you must put in the name of the information type for your EIT for you to be able to save your record. Then of course the P called from at the end is the same. Okay. Good. I'm going to just do a little bit of a whiteboard now, I think, and just demonstrate how this is hanging together, and hopefully it'll make the concepts a little clearer. So what I'm going to do is I am going to bring up a brand new whiteboard session. Okay, so we did a big whiteboard session in sessions 2 about RBAC. We're going to do something similar here just to make it hopefully easier to understand how all these bits of configuration hang together. So let's start off with the user. So we're using B. Erickson. Okay. And we'll keep it simple. We're just going to put one responsibility on this time, employee self-service, I think. I'm not going to take any shortcuts. I'm going to put the responsibility on. Try and spell it correctly. And of course, what we're missing on here, we need now a role. So I like to, even roles have a name, I like to put the code on just to make it clear that that's a role, not a responsibility. Role. Okay, so that's the first step. Let's just join those up. So the responsibility is given to the user just in a normal way. Oops. A bit messy on my lines there. And then of course, can you remember how the role is associated with the responsibility? Bit of a test. Role inheritance, okay? Role inheritance. Never forget your role inheritance. It's easy to forget that, but it's important. Okay, what's the next thing we want to draw? Okay, so we've talked about having the layout menu. I'm going to draw this a little bit bigger this time. Layout menu. So what's in the layout menu? So we've got some sub-functions in there, haven't we? We've got the layout itself. I'm going to call that one panel. Okay, so there's your one panel layout, so that's a function. What's the other function in here? Well, we've got the view function, remember? So we're going to put the view function in here. View function. I've left a space blank. There's something else going in there in a minute. Okay. Now I'm going to be drawing the RBAC on later on, but we haven't securely assigned this at the moment. Okay, and then we have another function over here. And this is the data function. So I'm going to put company property data function on here. And I'm going to put a big table down the bottom. Now we're working off an SIT view, aren't we? So I'm going to put in SIT view XXAS per person analyses V. A little bigger. Okay, and there's some lines to draw on here, isn't there? So let's put a line between this view function. Oops, that's not the colour I wanted. A line between the view function and the company property data function. And the company property data function points at this database table. Now, there's a lot more to go on here. I've missed off lines because we'll complete this diagram as we go along. But what this is saying is when you've got the layout menu here, It's got the panel information and the view function. We'll eventually use this to give access to the page, but in terms of actually presenting information in the page to the user, we've got a parameter that goes across to the company property data function, and that points to this object, which is based on the view XXAS person analysis V. So if I just do one more little thing on here, a bit smaller, it's P data function equals, okay, it's basically saying that that line there is a parameter on the view function to link it to this company property data function over here. And actually this is the architecture by which a lot of Applaud works. You have the kind of concept of a page, you securely give access to the page, and then that page links off to somewhere else that defines a data source. And that data source could be absences, it could be payslip information, it could be personal information, qualifications, bank details, or anything else. In this case we're looking at SITs, but generally this is the architecture we follow in general Applaud. I'm going to be coming back to this whiteboard in future sessions. Now there's one more piece left here. Let's just get back to my menu, and that is the create. So you notice when you go into particular records, you have the ability to add a new record. That comes from what we call the create permission. And it's basically a special function that controls whether your user can create or add new rows or not. Now, it's one area of Applaud where there is a little bit of hard coding in the name you have to give your functions and set it up, so it's not easy to find a place to slot this in, but it seems as good a place as any. How this works is, notice this is your data function here. This is the data function we just talked about. Look at the code. Okay, XXAS data code prop. Okay. Now, for a create permission, what you need to do is to copy or to create a new function or permission that has the same code as the data function with underscore create at the end. And then you have to give it the object name of Applaud HR assignment. So it's one of those things you just have to remember to do it in this way. The instruction guides take you through it, and if you copy anything that we've done, you'll see the same. But there's just a little bit of hard coding there. You have to call the function exactly the same as the data function code, but underscore create on the end. What this means is you don't get caught out and make these codes too long. This did catch me once out in an early implementation. I went overboard on my function names and function codes, made them nice and long, and then find out when I had to put underscore create on the end I didn't have enough characters. Function codes can only be 30 characters long at max. So if you have something that's 23 characters or more, you don't have space to get this underscore create on the end. So do watch out for that one. That's a bit of a gotcha. And then what you have to do is you have to add that create permission to the layout menu. I'll talk about a bit why this works when we get a little bit more into the security, but just for now, just remember that you have to put the create permission into the layout menu. So that was the thing I was missing on my whiteboard. If I go back to it here, I'm missing another function, which is my create permission. What it's basically is saying, if you're in tune with RBAC, what it's saying is, if I've got access to see the screen, I've got access to add a row. That's what it means. You know, at a high concept level, at a later point, we'll be given access to people, to roles, to be able to see this layout on the menu. And by adding this permission in here, what it means is, okay, I can see the menu, and if I can see the menu, I can add a row. That isn't always the case. Definitely requirements come along where Maybe you want to deploy this in a read-only fashion. Maybe you want to deploy it read-only to employees, and only managers have the ability to add a row. In that case, you would take this create permission out into a different permission set. But generally, this is the way to do it. You put the create permission in the layout menu, and if you've got access to see the screen, you'll have access to add a new row. If you forget to add that permission, or you get it mixed up or put it in the wrong place, basically what happens is you won't see the add button. Okay, it's almost exercise time. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go into our system and just demonstrate how this is hanging together and just take you through the screens. While that's loading, I'll just log into my other menu so I can see how that's looking. I've got one browser for using the app and another one for looking at the config. So here we are with Barry Erickson. Underneath personal, we have company property. Okay, notice I've got the add button showing there. Okay, so nice list of property on the menu here. Only shown on employee self-service. It's not a manager self-service action. Got add button there, allows me to add a row. So if I look into the setup of what's enabled that, so a bit of a revision here. We go back to the registered views menu. This is our registered views menu that we're using on this system. Under personal, we have company property. Under company property, there we've got that one region, that's specifying as one region on the page. We've got the view function, which is this, and we've also got the create permission there. So if I look at the view function, exactly what we've seen before. We've got a code, we've got the icon, we've got the flexible and list layout. We've got two formulas which we'll come on to in a second, and then we've got this important concept of the data function. If I look at the data function, there it is. There's the data function. And if I click on there, there's the code, there's the object name, and there's the other bits of information that you need to set as well. And if I go to my functions and I do % there, sorry, I need to go to security and permissions, put the code in again. There's the create permission. You can see it's part of that permission set. If you're quick, you would notice delete and updates are also there. When we first developed Employee Center, we did update and delete in the same way, but what we found is that got quite difficult on the configuration side quite quickly, and so that you can delete and update, you can control that through the view fast formula like we saw on the first session. So even though these are in here as examples, you don't need to use permissions to set update or delete. Good, so we're into our first exercise of this session. What we're going to be doing is going to be looking at the passport details page, which you can find under personal information and passports. This is based on an information type, and we're going to go through and get you to look at the setup for passport and use that as a topic for the forthcoming sessions. Hopefully when it runs for you, it runs quicker than it's running for me right now. Okay, let that load. Good, so I'll pause the training for 30 seconds, go ahead and do the training in your own time, and when you unpause the recording, I'll go through the answers. Good luck. All right, good. So let's see how we get on with this exercise. So question 1 for this session, we'll review the setup of the passport details page, which now it's loaded. It's on screen here. Got a nice little flag showing here. We'll look at how that flag is configured soon. Use the registered views menu to find the layouts and functions that define the passport view. Okay. So hopefully you do the same as me now and go into registered views. And it's under personal. It's under passports. Okay, we've got 2 in here. And notice we've got this thing called the 2 region horizontal layout. That's what defines its 2 regions on the page. We have the passport details view function, and we've also got the passport details create permission. So what's the question? That's the layout and the functions. Okay, so if I click onto the function, this is the details of the function. Based on Applaud assignment, P module flexible, form, data function, formula name, and icon. Next question, what is the name of the data function for the passport view? So that's easy enough, that's there. XXA is data passport, that should have been your answer. Let's have a look at that one. Okay, there it is. Look at the data function to find out if the passport view is set up against an EIT or SIT. What's the name of the flex field info type or structure code? Okay, kind of the data object gave it away a little bit. Actually, what I wanted you to do is look at the object name here, and you can figure out that that is an EIT. So you see the EIT package. There's the information type, so it's based on per US passport details. There's the XML, there's the P called from we use in the standard Oracle workflow for EITs. Interestingly, passports and company property are ones that are shipped in standard Oracle. So when you actually install our software, you should actually get these EITs and SITs, company property and passports already working. They would work on your environment. Oracle don't ship that many, but these are 2 that they do ship. So if you want to get something working really quickly, just to show customers an EIT working without any other configuration, you could use these 2. Although in reality most customers want to see that by their own EITs working, but these 2 should work out of the box for you. Looking at the name of the data object, what would you expect to be the name of the create permission? And then go back and find out and check. So this is the thing about remembering the hard coding. Take the data function code and add underscore create to the end. So there's my code. That should be that with underscore create. So if I go back to my menus, personal, company, wrong one. Go to passports. Go to create permission for passports here. Let's see. Click on this, and there you go. XXAS data underscore create. Object name Applaud HR assignment. You must remember this as well. Another thing that's easy to forget. Okay, so really that was just an exercise in going through stuff we already knew pretty much, but the new bits there were that idea of that data source and that little piece on the create permission. But that data source is a very important concept which we're going to come on to in later sessions. Okay, that's the end of this particular session. The next session is a quick one, just revisiting fast formula for view and edit of EITs and SITs. So that is the end of this recording. Thank you.